Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good day everyone. I hope you guys doing great. So we are from the group 5 from IR on Islamic Perspective. Our group member are me, Mahsa Kaulika, and Rifdhah Fadhillah, Fitria Wulandari, and also Nanda Blestri. So in today's presentation, we are going to present to you about the resume assignment that asked by Mr. Sidiq Ahmadi. It is about the concept of state in Islam. Okay, so about the first discussion in this resume is about the Islamic State, transnational khilafah or national state. So Islam is a religion which based on the principle which revealed directly by Allah Subhanahu wa Taala through the holy verses of the Quran and the Sunnah, which originated from the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Allah has given the new rules for the mankind in carrying out their lives, where the latest attack is written in the Quran, which contains things that human can and cannot do while living in this world. Speaking about Allah's law, which contains positive and negative things, or in Arabic it is called amawar and nawahi, where the second things is direct command that's sent down by Allah to mankind to always do and stay away from his prohibitions. Even in the holy books of Al-Quran, in the Surah An-Nisa verse 59, which states that as believers, we must obey Allah and His Messenger and ulil amri between us. And if one day there are differences or problems that arise between the mankind, then the path that must be taken as a solution or to the problem must be returned to Allah through the holy book of the Quran and the Prophet through the teachings of his Sunnah. This obedience also applied in the concept of state according to its Islam perspective, so that any governmental instrument in any states, specifically in Islamic state, must also refers to the Holy Quran. Next, please. Okay, so the second thing is about the concept of state in Islam. In Islam itself, there is the two definition about the state itself. As mentioned in previous meetings, it is about the first thing is about there is a term Darul Islam, which can be interpreted as a country that applies Islamic law as the foundation of a state. So that is called a country of peace. Islamic viewpoint also assume that Muslims must become leaders of a country, both politically and also economically. If a country is led by non-Muslim society, Islam perspective name this country as a Darul Harb or a country of war. So Muslim community which living in the Islamic State coexists on three main principles. That is the equality, solidarity, and freedom that is really reflected on the Muslim society in current world. There are also three important characteristics that need to be known in understanding the concept of state in Islam. That is the existence of a Muslim community, or what is known as Millah, Islamic law or Sharia, and the Muslim community leadership model, are commonly known as Khalifah. Next slide, please. Okay, so in the fifth thing is about the Islamic State itself. The Islamic State places Islamic law as the highest authority that governs all aspects of the life of the state, as previous in the first and second group of presentation. And the next is about the context of Islamic State itself. So in Islamic State, there are three main contexts that we have to know. The first is the head of the Muslim community itself, which called Khalifah. And the second thing is Islamic law, whereas in Islamic, the perspective of Islam, seen the Islamic State have two body, whereas these are the executive and judiciary. But first, in Islamic law, there is a judiciary body, or in Arabic known as Qada. There are two important organs, specifically in Islamic constitution, as I mentioned before, that are executive and judiciary. Where in general state, there are the role of legislative, but in Islamic state, there is no legislative role as applied in many countries that implement the role of three kind of bodies, whereas executive, judiciary, and legislative. In Islamic State, only two bodies that used in governmental instrument. And from this kind of differentiate, we can be seen that from an Islamic state with a secular state is very clear, where the Islamic state is governed by Allah's law, which is written directly in the Holy Book of Al-Quran, while in secular state, they are operated in a series of rules which made by the mankind itself. We can see from the law that that apply in those kind of country in secular state. I mean, whereas the law they implement were made by the mankind itself, and a very clear difference is that a sovereign state in general, whereas a country must have certain condition, where a country must have sovereignty, have the people, and also have the clear territory provision. Whereas in the concept of Islamic State, these three conditions cannot be justified. Because when talking about sovereignty, the endmost sovereignty only in Allah and the form of an Islamic State is totally not a national state, since the Muslim community, which has a different background, shares a common spiritual aspiration, where this is reflected through their faith in Islamic religion. Regarding the third condition that must be owned by a country, that is territory, Islamic State is not a regular territorial state, where back in the past, the Prophet Muhammad, when he was still spreading the teaching of Islam, and eventually expanded as it today, which makes the territory of the Islamic State also more widespread, then it clearly different from the concept of state in general, which has already determined the boundaries of a country. This also makes an Islamic State is commonly known as a multinational state. However, it is important to know that the aim of the Islamic State is to building a Muslim community that is free to determine the model of life and constitutional structure that must stick to what is written in the Holy Quran. So next discussion will be delivered by my friend.
Okay, well, the next is I'm going to explain about the government system in the context of Islamic State. So after we talk about how the form of Islamic State itself, after that we want to discuss about how the government run in the Islamic State. Based on the Sunni, the Holy Prophet didn't nominate or appoint any successor, nor did he lay down any procedure or framework for constituting or deposing his successor. So actually, at the first place, the Islamic State itself is started from the democracy form. However, during the Khalifah period, the appointment method is adopted, such as conducting the general election, that the community will be able to elect the best man through initial election, nomination, and election through the electoral college. In all cases, followed by private bay'ah. Subsequently, the appointment being confirmed to public bay'ah. So it is like the modern democracy we are facing now, where the people, the public, can choose their leader in the election. And after that, the leader will be do like such an oath. The oath here is called the term as a bay'ah, which in Islamic terminology is an oath of alliance to a leader. So it is at the first place. Actually, Islamic State is emphasize the form of democracy, but then the democracy system. The democracy system that used in the first four caliphs later was being abandoned by the Muslim community since the death of Muawiyah, who chose his son as his successor. So it is the first time, or like the transformation of the time changing between the change of the form of democracy into the monarchy system. At the first time was introduced by Muawiyah. Meanwhile, during the first four caliph period, the Muslim community at the time have the four political parties, such as Ansar, Muhajirin, and Banu Hasim. These political parties is such as the parties that it became the place to absorb the voice of people, to the voice of public, to choose their leader, to make their policy, and so on and so on. But throughout the later history of Islam, the reigning Khalifah nominated one of his sons or kingsmen as his successor, and the oath of alliance was secured for him. So at the time, after the death of Muawiyah choose his son to be his successor. This is the first time where our government system concept changed it from the democracy into the monarchy system itself. Moreover, in the Abbasid era, double nomination were also made, which led the two successors to hold the office. And this arrangement frequently led to wars of succession. So, as we know that in the monarchy system, if the leader or the leader is chosen by as the successor from the previous leader, it will lead to the the conflict, to the wars between the relative, between the brother, between the sister, between the family, and so on and so on. And this is this is the form of government that at the first place is avoided by Islam. But since the leader, or since the era of Muawiyah, the form of government system is abandoned or is being left by the Muslim community. Meanwhile, actually, the ideal Islamic polity was actually figured in the period of the rightly guided caliphs. The replacement of Khalifa by another through force, coercion, or absorption, according to Sunni jurists, was considered as a legitimate method of change of government. However, there is an adaptation in modern Muslim position that doesn't have any restrictive significance. Uh, Therefore, as I say that in the rightly guided caliphs, Islamic State has figured as the ideal or the most ideal era of Islamic State at the time because with the conflict or the wars that the appears, it's not between the family, but it is between the force. For example, at the election of Abu Bakr is the leader from the political party called the political party called Ansar. Called Muhajirin. At the time, why Abu Bakar is chosen after the death of the Prophet Muhammad is because Ansar, which is the political party that supported by the Abu Bakar, was based on the ground that they constitute the bulk of the armed forces of Islam, and they even suggested as the alternative the divisibility of delegated sovereignty. However, at the time, the chosen of Abu Bakar is still asking for permission from the public. Does the public agree or not? Does the people agree if Abu Bakar take power after the death of Prophet or not? But however, we face the transformation of the government system itself. And the next will be continued by my friend.
Okay, so I'm going to continue the discussion that have been stated by my friends before. So from this period onwards, according to Sunni jurists, replacement of a caliph by another through force, coercion, or usurpation was considered as a legitimate method of change of government. And at this stage, according to some Sunni jurists like Shah Waliullah, methods for constitution a caliph or imam are restricted only to those adopted during the times of the rightly guided caliphs or through usurpation. And according to Al-Mawardi, the role of a usurping Amir is legitimate if he governs the state in accordance with the Islamic law and probably under the doctrine of necessity, as propounded by Al-Ghazali, that the tyranny of a usurping Amir was preferable to chaos. However, the others think that Amir also requires approval from the Muslim community in addition to govern the state in accordance with the Islamic law itself. So, as long as the Muslim world remained one and united, theoretically it was managed and administered by a universal caliphate, even though it had been transferred into a hereditary or dynasty monarchy. And on the sack of Baghdad by the Mongols, when Abbasid Caliph was put to death, there was a period for 3 years that there is no caliph in the world of Islam. And in the later period of Islamic history, when a lot of rulers managed to acquire power or control specific territories in the world of Islam and the universal caliphate only existed in the name, and these rulers didn't adopt the title of caliph or imam, but remained content to call themselves Amir, Sultan, and other names. So the next slide, please. So the modern revival of Islam started from the 18th century onwards, when a lot of independent or semi-independent Muslim national states emerged in the world of Islam. So when Islam entered the modern history, the questions that arose since then was, if the universal caliphate had become a thing of the past, could it defend Muslim national communities to manage their affairs by themselves? So after the breakup of the Ottoman Empire and the abolition of the caliphate in Constantinople in 1924, Turkey was the first country in the world of Islam to advance the reasoning to the effect that the power of the Khalifa or Imam could be vested in a body of person in the front of an elected assembly. So um, this was the viewpoint of Khawarij in the earlier history of Islam, who had held that it was not obligatory on the Muslim community to appoint a Khalifa, but the Muslims could manage their affairs themselves by mutual consultation as recommended by the Quran. And other also expressed that the effect in modern Muslim national states elected assemblies could constitute ijna or shura of the Muslim community, and it makes subordinate legislation on the basis of ijtihad or the interpretation of the Islamic law in accordance with the changing needs and requirements of the Muslim community in the light of principles laid down in the Quran and Sunnah. So a Muslim national state Muslim national state doesn't become states until it adopts the characteristic features of the same which still remain unalterable. And next slide. So the democratic method, which has been adopted by some of the Muslim countries due to the influence of Western ideas, is admittedly not a perfect method, because an Islamic state is expected to run by the best people of the community only, and the democratic method, although adopted by the Western countries in order to achieve the same object, doesn't ensure the election of the best people of the community, because competent candidate may be defeated by unsuitable or incompetent candidate only for the reason that the other person obtained more votes or more heads that has been counted in his favor. So it also similar that a vote is no substitute for bayat, because bayat is a bilateral contract, whereas a vote doesn't have the implications of contract like bayat. So if this rule is usually adopted for the selection, for instance, of a judge, then why should it not be adopted for the election of a so-called legislator? So the supporters of this point of view also argue that since Muslim constitute Allah's party, the multi-party system has no place in Islamic State as it's repugnant to the Quran and Sunnah. So So, as the real object of Islam is to establish a community of faith governed by Sharia, the Muslim community is free to evolve any suitable method for the enforcement of Islamic law. Therefore, it is necessary to educate and train the Muslim community in order to make it conscious of its rights and obligations under the Islamic law. Through education and training, and it will be in a position to elect the best members of the community. It is also argued that although the Muslim community is almost party, the formation of groups among Muslims for promoting good and suppressing evil is recommended by the Quran and Sunnah. After the death of the Holy Prophet, when three political groups emerged from Muslim community, and later during the Caliphate of Ali, when two more political groups were formed, no objection was raised. So political parties can be permitted to function in a Muslim national state, provided if it's provided that they are adhere to the Islamic ideology and operate strictly within its framework. And it is further argued that the democratic method must be adopted because there is no other appropriate substitute for the time being which would yield better results as required by Islamic standards. So there were some conflict in viewpoints regarding Western and next slide Islamic forms of democracy. Yes, thank you. It creates a being faced by some Muslim national states at present, and it's probably due to this reason that there are occasional instances of political state breakdown leading to the establishment of military dictatorship. Because a Muslim national state cannot claim itself to be an Islamic state unless and until its constitution strictly adheres to the principles of ultimate sovereignty vesting in Allah and the supremacy of Islamic law. But it must be clearly understood that an Islamic state is not a theocracy. Islam doesn't recognize the distinction between spiritual and secular, and it is incumbent on every Muslim to constantly endeavor to realize spiritual values while performing his temporal obligations. And in this sense, the Islamic State in the modern context assimilates the qualities of an ideal secular state. In the positive sense, a secular state ought to guarantee religious freedom to every citizen and endeavor to promote the material advancement and welfare of all its citizens without distinction of religion or race. This is also one of the many duties of an Islamic state, which at the same time is to protect the places of worship and culture of citizens who adhere to faiths other than Islam under the Quranic injunction laid down in Surah 22, verse 40. So, since the faiths of religious minorities are to be protected, they can adopt any measure of self-protection, including the claim for separate electorates or representation in the form of a fixed quota of seats. So next will be continued by my friends.
Okay, so I'm going to present about Islamic concept of human rights. And before we go to the first point, we know that different ideologies actually produce different concepts of human rights. Examples are Marxist and capitalism, which have different concepts about the human rights. Marxists, who emphasize the particular economic rights of a group, and democracy places more emphasis on individual political rights as a citizen in a state. So various other understandings held by several countries are also different from the concept of human rights from Marxism and also democracy. But in Islam, just like what my first point stated, that the right of man can be directly traced from Quran and Sunnah, Islam also has its own understanding of welfare and rights, which is then divided into two categories. The first is that hakukullah, and the second one is hakukul ibad. So as a servant of God, you got the rights, or in Arab you call it as hak. And as a God, Allah got hakukullah. Islamic State guarantees the rights of Allah as well as of man. We can trace it this right from the Quran and the Sunnah for life, and the scope are almost include all of the sector, just like individual freedom, equality before law, and prohibition against immersible direction, justice, fair trial, protection against abuse of power, against torture of honor and reputation, asylum, equality of status and about the opportunity, freedom of thoughts, expression, belief, faith, worship, association, assembly, movement, trade, maybe business or profession, what to hold and dispose of property, protection of minorities, to participate in the conduct and management of public affairs, status and dignity of workers, social security, founding a family and related matters of married woman, education, and also privacy, such as one of the sunnah, just like what our Khalifah in the past, Khalifah Umar bin Khattab, do that he tried to climb the roof to meet the servant of God, but he can't do that even if he was a Khalifah. So Islam is actually have the rule to set all of our privacy and rights. And the second point is that the establishment of the legislature requires firstly aware of rights and obligations under the Islamic law. In the Islamic perspective, which regulates all life, such as in political life, the legislature in the Islamic State has a restrictive power of legislation to technically express opinion or speak. There are three spheres of its legislative activity in a Muslim national state. The first one is that to enforce laws which have specifically been laid down in the Quran and also Sunnah. And the second one, to bring all the existing laws in conformity with the Quran and Sunnah. And the third one is to make laws as subordinate legislation which are not repugnant to the Quran and Sunnah. And according to some modern Muslims, from Muslim jurists, presidential form of democracy is closer to the concept of Islamic State. Just like what my third point stated, that the Muslim community is at liberty to evolve any model of constitutional structure based on the principle of mutual consultation. The model of presidential is the closer one to the Islamic concept of state, just like Hakokul Ibad, or the rights of human to divide it, what kind of constitutional that apply to the state. Muslims are free or at liberty to apply any model of it as long as they acknowledge the sovereignty of Allah and also holding the supremacy of Islamic law and concerned about it as long as it fulfills the requirement like what has been laid down in the Quran and Sunnah. That's all from us. Any question?